Hi, Mark Drajan from Bloomberg News. And I was struck by the changes in attitudes among Americans towards China over the last 2 years. It seems that Americans' views have gotten more negative, while congressional staffers' views have gotten more positive, or at least not as negative. Is there any sense of what is driving that? And secondly, what the potential impact of that would be on legislation, some kind of protectionist legislation aimed at China?
Let me start first. The positive view of the U.S. of China actually declined a little bit among the groups, general public or elite group opinion leaders, only like few percentage. But you are right, the congressional staff, their favorable view of China increased from 19% in 2 years ago to 35% this year. Now, this may relate to a broad change of American, views of China. We see that there's a general trend. Previously, when we talk about China, we talk about the authoritarian regime and talk about human rights violations and other problems. Now moving towards about China's responsibility as a stakeholder, particularly in the area of economy and environment. So there's a lack of ideological view to look at China. This may have a direct impact to the change of views of the congressional staffers. But at the same time, the few percentage decline of American positive view of China related with some recent incidents, in my view. For example, early this year, the anti-Chinese, anti-missile, anti-satellite missile test certainly, enhance our worries or fear of our American public. But probably more importantly is the product safety and these issues certainly reduce the favorable views. But again, as I mentioned, that this is one factor, but this is subject to the recent news. But on the other hand, we do see some very favorable views of China among American public, business leaders, opinion leaders, to a certain extent, including congressional staffers, about the Olympics, about the China's middle class, about the future political development in China. So that actually is quite positive. So we should put it in that context.
I would add to that there's a subtlety here. There's a difference between the elite views and the general public's views. But in addition to that, and you can see this detailed on page 4 of the report, elites misperceive the general public's views. In both countries, they get it wrong. I would say trust the people, not the leaders. If you take a look, what this survey shows is that the majority of U.S. business leaders and congressional staffers think that the American public holds negative views of China. That's wrong. A majority of the U.S. public holds favorable views of China. And it's a mirror image in China. A majority, 91%, an overwhelming majority of Chinese business leaders believe that the Chinese public holds a favorable opinion of the U.S., but in fact, a quarter of the Chinese public holds an unfavorable view. So there's a misperception. It's not just a difference in the views. The leaders in each nation somehow don't have a good feel for what people in that nation actually believe.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Lyndon Tao from China Daily. In chart 5, it shows that 55% of people surveyed in China believes China will become the world's leading superpower 20 years from now. So, Victor, could you elaborate on that?
Well, last year I asked some Chinese experts from the United States, asked them what are misperception from China, from Chinese, their view about the development of the country. And some of them told me, actually, Chinese is not confident enough about the rising of the country. So if you look at this year's polling, and we do see that kind of a rising of the self-confidence about it from many sides. Of course, if you also look at from the so-called right direction of the right track of the country, you still can see that. I think the overall Chinese really have that pretty positive way about the country's direction. But of course, with many complaints about the detail, specific problems. So I think that's a kind of a combined feeling just like Dr. Li Chen said, that kind of contradiction, perception about a country's development.
Alice?
You noted the improvement in the congressional group's opinions, and yet there is still a substantial gap between the opinions of the public and the opinions of the congressional representatives. Would you like to comment on that, what the reasons for that might be?
Well, it should not be a surprise. And U.S. Congress actually has been taking a very critical view of China for a long time. And, again, that we probably also have some bills, waiting to be passed about most of them are quite negative. And although we do see that the U.S. Congressional Working Group on China now become, very active, very dynamic in the Congress. Previously, when it was established a few years ago, it had only 15 members. Now 60 members, so significant increase. So I think even from the congressional side, they realize the importance of China and also the importance of that relationship, not only just in the economic dimension, but also environment, security, anti-terrorism, and various energy, and etc. So, but at the same time, that we also know that there's also the economic protectionist view that has been quite strong in the U.S. Congress, to a certain extent also reflects the general public view, although we probably should read it very carefully, as Frank just mentioned that. So I think, first of all, this result is not so surprising, but I think it's also indicated tremendous room or opportunity for both sides continue to have a dialogue. I think the Congress-to-Congress relationship should be improved in the China's National People's Congress and the U.S. Congress. There's a lot of activities going on. I heard that there's a delegation from National People's Congress is coming to the United States. They try to continue to talk about issues. I think that for the United States, we should certainly to use our leverage to talk about human rights and various issues in our concern. But at the same time, we also should listen to the China's side view. I think through dialogue, through communication, through exchanges, probably can change. But I just want to say this. Yeah.
There's another specific factor. It is Taiwan. Congressional staffers are far more likely than the general public to rate Taiwan as a potential source of conflict. Indeed, for congressional staffers, trade is the top area of conflict, as it is with every group within the U.S. But number two, following trade very closely, is Taiwan. And in addition, congressional staffers are much more likely to favor intervention should military conflict arise. So that is in the background.
But is that a reflection of the people's desires?
No, it is not. There is a significant gap between the perception and attitude of congressional staffers and the general public.
Ricky Masan from China Daily. 41% of the general public of the U.S. still feel very concerned over loss of jobs to China, and only 12% of Congress is mentioning that. Why is the U.S. general public so concerned, and are they misinformed in being so concerned?
That's probably, in my view, tied to the general concern about the U.S. economy. The economy rates as one of the most significant concerns for the population. So the single most important economic indicator for any individual is whether or not they have a job. And so it's no surprise that people are very concerned, and because trade with China has become so prominent, it's easy to look at China and blame China and believe that China is the cause, direct cause of unemployment in general, or of your own particular woes and fears.
Well, I just want to add one thing, which is true that there's easy to use China as a target, but also one thing, come out as a surprise in this survey. Also, majority of Americans actually think that the United States government also should be responsible. Actually, more percentage of American general public believe that's the case. So again, the trade deficits and the imbalances or integrity of trade. Of course, some issues related with China, but also, our companies and our government also should take some initiative and not entirely should blaming China. This is come very clearly from our survey.
Yes, ma'am.